couple of minutes on the near future of commercial space. I've never put a satellite in space, never been to space, like to go to space. I get up every morning and drag my airplane out and fly down to Mojave with the dream that what we're doing with the number of companies, now 19, will actually make it possible for more of us to go to space. And as Chad knows, for years we've been working together and collaborating on taking the best practices that we think we are developing and think we are working on in Mojave, because if we are successful, hopefully many of you will have a chance to be successful around the globe. 10 years ago, I had a meeting, actually it's 2003, with Peter Diamandis and Greg Marinac down in Los Angeles, and we were talking about the potential of one of the 26 competing teams showing up to win the X Prize. And it was possible that year that one of the 26 teams would actually show up to the finish line with a winning concept. And for those of you that read the blogs and the press, 11 days ago we celebrated the 10th anniversary in Mojave and held an event that brought anybody who wanted to come together that was part of the X Prize 10 years ago. And we set certain goals in 2003 of what the venue might look like, how we would export that venue to a thirsty world that was interested in our industry, and what some of the outcomes we thought were essential that were by and large overlooked by the current space industry. We understood the thirst, and we understood that if you go back, and because I'm a historian, if you go back to the photographs that were captured at Kitty Hawk in 1903, there's no picture of a child in those photos. And so we said, if we're going to run an event where we're going to have another Kitty Hawk moment, potentially, how could we bring kids into the equation? And let's start a bit of a renaissance on this new industry and do something that we can. So most of you don't know that the day of the X Prize winning flight, we bussed 4,000 children from the inner city. And I remember we found a person that was willing to fund that and said, if you can get them there, we will take care of them and keep them safe beginning at 3 in the morning until you put them back on the bus and take them home. And we did that. And from that, we began the process of, now that we've proven we can actually take kids. Well, those kids are no longer in the 4th grade. You get where I'm going with this? Those kids are now in college. And those kids had an experience that I guarantee you they still remember. And so now at Mojave, for the last 4 years, we've brought in summer and intersession interns. And where I see the near future of space is we've created a pipeline of kids that now come to Mojave. And maybe there's only 40 or 50 a summer that get threaded through 165 different companies, 19 of which are in the space industry. And now the National Test Pilot School at Mojave holds a course for 2 weeks to take nothing but kids who apply to come to a space, or not a space camp, but a flight test camp, where they actually fly hardware, and these are high school juniors. And so we're making inroads, and I am committed, and I am convinced that those little efforts to bring the next generation in are what has, and my metric of proof of this, when I took over Mojave, the average age of a worker in our industry in Mojave was 53. Today it's 35. The numbers have been reversed. And I am convinced that the work and the efforts, and if you all took on that challenge to make it absolutely real, that you must bring in interns in the summer, and it's okay to have an interview. Those become your best recruiters. You no longer have to recruit. Those kids go home and they bring their friends. And it solves the recruitment problem. So for the near future, one of the biggest things I can report that I have seen a shift in our ability to recruit for our industry, and the thirst that we thought was alive in 2003, it is, and it's healthy. And you know, I'm a 61-year-old guy about to turn 62. My kids are 30 years old, but to me it's enlightening that we actually had a plan that's working. And the other evidence of where near space is going, I think it was 2004, there were 4 or 5 of us got together at Elon's shop And we decided to hold a meeting to start an organization, which we really struggled over the name, and I think it was somehow we boiled it up to the Personal Spaceflight Federation, that has morphed into the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. And one of the things we said is we need an organization that will take on the challenge of policing our own industry, coming up with standards that we write that will become standards of how we're going to operate as an industry. And you know, after 10 years, Eric, correct me, didn't we just pass our first and working on our second? Or did we pass 2 officially?
I think we're on the second.
Or on the second. Well, you know what? It's always that first one's the tough one. But we did it. And George, that's an area that I know you're focused on in your organization, and we're actually rather proud of that. You had a first success. And it may not sound like much, but it's how we do tests, how we conduct tests, and the protocols we use on how we're going to test. And the first thing you had to do is what's a test? Define it. Well, I'm a cowboy, remember? I used to hunt around and look for the cows. And to me, it had to be real simple. A test is you don't know the outcome. Seems simple enough? So if you don't know the outcome, we're going to structure a test where only certain people can be present. Because if they go wrong, I don't want to take out a bunch of looky-loos. We've done that once in Mojave. And so it was important that the industry police itself with simple things that will make a profound and long-term difference in the industry. So those certain things that were started a number of years ago are starting to show benefits to the industry. And again, the fact that we are attracting so many members of this industry into the CSF, and they have a voice. We have a very active board. I had the pleasure of chairing that board for 2 years. We've hired Eric, and Eric, I think you need to be recognized. I don't think you're speaking at this event, but I am extremely pleased that you want the job, and you've got it, and you're a great leader. And so if you don't know Eric Stallmer, Eric, introduce yourself to the crowd, and he's the new president of the CSF. So these may not be what you want to hear as the near space, but these are big deals. And the fact that Eric wanted to be the leader going forward is huge. So most things that we talk about involve people, they involve process, and they involve the correct application of technology. I think by each yardstick, whether you're talking about the people, we've seen a huge influx and a driving down of the average age of the workforce in our industry. That's a big deal. On the process side, we're starting to see real commercial ventures enter the game. You know, the fact that Elon is a 10-year-old company, is SpaceX 10-year-old company, and won a contract and has been delivering cargo to the International Space Station reliably is fairly significant for a company that just a few years ago had less than 3,000 people. Scale Composites, when I took over Mojave, had 30-some employees, 30-some employees. And 2 years later, they put 2 of their employees in space with 30 people that were building a spaceship and 2 airplanes to do that. Now they're building Stratolaunch for Paul Allen, which is the biggest airplane ever built. A lot of people, when they come to Mojave, say, you know, you have a telescope to the future from Mojave. And in some regard, we do. But what I see in near future, I see rangeless operations of satellites to space, not only the Ariane, the SpaceX, the Sea Launch, the Deltas and the like, but there's going to be new market entry into this, and it's be air launch to orbit, fairly substantial payloads being able to be delivered from aircraft in a somewhat of a rangeless arena. Take off from an airport, airplane lands back at an airport or a spaceport, and can maybe go thousands of miles in order to conduct the launch for a polar, elliptical, or even a solar launch. So those are new changes, and I think it's incumbent on us to endorse the change in an industry. And yesterday I was talking to the local business leaders, and they were talking about the change locally and what some of it means. And I will say, you know who opposed the auto industry? It was the buggy whip makers. Who opposed the vacuum industry was the broom makers. And it's logical for people who have been in the industry for a long time to oppose new market entry. that's natural. But I think it's also natural to embrace that. The last comment is that 10 years ago, it was difficult to see how this new commercial interest could have an effect to where your reach actually exceeded your grasp. And the fact that the commercial entries that started 10 years ago are now actually holding major contracts with the National Space Agency and providing services to others around the globe truly proves that we are in a global market. I think you're going to see some policy changes over the next few years on ITAR and actually make it more attractive for domestic and international partners to work more closely together. I know the CSF has taken that on and other organizations as well. I think that's a real positive step forward. On the front end, interesting, I was reviewing some of my video from this platform years ago, and I was asked when Virgin would be flying, and it's always difficult for me to predict and talk about tenants, but I did make a comment then. My date was 2015, Dick Rattan's was 2018. It was interesting. I think that interview, I don't know where it was, but I had the video. It was interesting, those numbers came out, and I believe the date was 2006. I'm still holding to my number. I think it's next year. And Chad, I think it's time to get ready. And to the local community, I really am proud of what you've done at Spaceport America. I was out there Monday, and Chris and Chad and Aaron set it up for me to go out and have a personal tour by one of the guards, and to see the changes and the absolute beauty of brand new facilities. And I was saying, man, I started with an old Marine base that had fallen apart and then sat fallow for a number of years, and look what you have. And to me, it's an international asset. And I really wish you well, but I think this is your year. And thank you very much for having me to ISPCS.